Okay, I'm not going to be here today because my daughter is at home sick, so I'm going to make y'all this video for what we were supposed to do today, and then hopefully you'll be able to do the homework on your own. It's really not that bad. Alright, so here we go. Alright, so we've done sine and cosine, so now we're going to start doing cosecant and secant. And really with these, all we're going to do is we're going to increase the amplitude, or we're going to move it up or down. Okay, so the most important thing that you need to remember about cosecant is that cosecant is related to y equals 1 over sine x. Okay, so since it's related to 1 over sine x, I can actually use the same numbers that I used to graph the sine function. So if I come over here and I make my little table, okay, and then remember that sine starts with 0, 1, 0, -1, and 0. And again, because we're not transforming it or anything, all we're going to do is we're going to do the 0 pi, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and then 2 pi. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is that we want to, let's label our graph. And again, the A value is going to be 1, and the B value is 1, and everything else is 0. So this is just your very basic one. And then we're really not going to worry about domain and range too much here. Okay, on this one, I know the highest it'll go is 1 for the sine function. Okay? And then, if I number it, there's my pi over 2, pi, so same thing we've been doing, 3 pi over 2, and then 2 pi. Okay, so I'm going to graph just the regular sine function. So again, I'm basing everything right now off of the sine function. So plot all those points to create your sine function. Okay, now watch what's about to happen though. Okay, so that's my sine function, right? But remember, we're doing cosecant. So cosecant is 1 over sine. So if I now take these numbers and put a 1 over each one of them, well, wait a minute, that's undefined. You can't divide by 0. Okay, well this equals 1, that's good. This would then also become undefined. This would equal -1, and this too would become undefined. So what's all of a sudden happened is I've created asymptotes here at 0. I've created another asymptote at pi, and I've created another asymptote at 2 pi. Okay, so now what I do is, and this is kind of cool, so I really only have 2 points, right? 1 and -1. So watch what's about to happen. So this would become my graph for cosecant, and it would just be this part. Probably should use a different color here. If you have a different color, this would be a really good place to probably use it. Let me fix mine so you can see that it's a different color. Okay, so that's my first part of the cosecant graph. And that's my second part. And again, make sure those graphs are not crossing those asymptotes. This is where it's undefined, where the answer cannot be that. Okay. So now, let's go do the secant one. Okay, so for the secant graph, you need to remember that secant is related to cosine. So for this one, it would actually end up being y equals 1 over cosine x. And again, for this one, it's really that a is 1, the b is 1. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing here. All right, and we're going to do it the way we've always been doing it, because I'm not doing a phase shift. I'm not doing anything too crazy here. I don't have a b or c value that I'm messing with. So I'm just taking these off of the unit circle. And again, this is one that kind of looks like a sandwich. So 1, 0, -1, 0, 1. Okay, so if I just go graph my regular cosine function, okay, so I just numbered my graph. And then if I just go graph my regular function, I end up with my basic cosine function. Make sure they're looking a little kind of curvy, y'all. They should look a little curvy. Okay, so, but again, because secant is really 1 over cosine, I'm now going to come through and I need to put a 1 over all of these. And you can probably start noticing that I'm going to have, again, some undefineds. So 1 divided by 1 is 1. Can't divide by 0. So that's undefined. This would be -1. This is also undefined. And that is 1. Okay, so I'm going to put up where my asymptotes are going to be. So I'll have an asymptote at pi over 2, because it's undefined at pi over 2, and it's also undefined at 3 pi over 2. Now for this one, this is the one where I'm now going to use all the curve points. So the 2 maximums right here and the minimum. And there it is. Okay, so we also need to make sure that we're moving these points. So what we're now going to do is I'm going to move the points. So skip over till you get to the 4 graphs right here. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're just going to move them, okay? So the first thing is, let's see, let me pick one. Let's do y equals secant x minus 1. Okay, so again, it's important to remember that secant is related to 1 over cosine. So really all I'm doing here is I'm taking that cosine function and I'm moving it down 1. So if I were to make my value, my table of values, again, I'm not messing with the b value, so I'm still going to use the 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. Okay, so I'm still using those. And then remember, cosine is going to be, it's 1 over cosine. So 1 over 1, 1 over 0, 1 over -1, 1 over 0, and 1 over 1. Okay, then what I'm going to do is I have to subtract 1. So I'm going to do -1, -1, -1, -1, -1, minus 1. Okay, so if I do that, I'm still going to have places where it is going to be undefined, so I'm not going to be able to do it there. So for instance, the first place that it's undefined is going to be at that pi over 2. So let me come through here and let me make my graph. So this is going to be my pi over 2. This is pi. This is 3 pi over 2. And this is 2 pi. Okay, and then this is going to be a 1. This is negative 1. Okay, so all I'm doing now is I'm moving this whole thing down. So that's 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. So I'm going to have a point here. Okay, then this is undefined. Can't do anything here. So that's going to be negative 1. And then the pi, that's negative 1. Negative 1 minus 1 is negative 2. And I probably, whoops, I didn't leave enough room. So negative 2. So bring that down, negative 2. It's going to be a little off because I didn't count correctly. And then you're going to have 3 pi over 2, which is then going to be at the negative 1. And then you'll have the 2 pi, and that's going to be at 0. Okay, so there's my cosine. Okay, now remember, I am going to have asymptotes at places that it was undefined. So it was undefined here. And it was undefined here. Now remember, this is the cosine graph. The cosine doesn't have any undefined, but because of this undefined and this undefined, I have to put it there. Okay. So then here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to now put the secant graph. So this is the secant graph. This is where the asymptotes come into play. So basically with these, just move the cosecant graph down 1, and then you just do your little offshoots here. Okay, let's do one more. All right, the next one's going to be y equals 4 cosecant x. Now remember, that's going to be related to 4 sine x. All right, so here for this one, let me make sure I do my counting correctly. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm just going to make my graph right now. So pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. Okay, so if I make my sine graph, okay, I'm going to make my sine graph. Remember, sine is 0, 1, 0, negative 1, 1. So this is the 0 pi, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take each of those, I'm going to multiply by 4. Okay, so if I multiply that by 4, I get 0. Multiply that by 4, I get 4. Multiply this by 4, I get 0. Multiply this by 4, I get negative 4. Multiply that by 4. That should be a 0. I don't know why I just put that there. All right, and then that should be 0. Okay, so make sure you get that down. Okay, now remember, I'm having to... Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to now just draw my regular graph. Okay, so I've got 0 down here. I've got this at 4. I've got this at 0. I've got this at negative 4. Again, that should be a negative right there. And I have this at 0. Alright, so there's my graph for that. And then again, I'm going to have some asymptotes. So the asymptotes here are going to be at pi over 2. Oh, I'm sorry, they're going to be at pi. And then they're also going to be at 2 pi. And I'm actually going to have one here too. And again, it's because I'm going to have to go through and put a 1 over all of these, and then it just starts changing. And then at this point, and it's really like, on these, you're really just trying to draw a graph at the top and the bottom. So really, if you just move, you move the other ones, so you're going to move, like, multiply all those by 4, and then on the top, you're going to put this one, and on the bottom, you'll put this one. Okay, and then of course you got to have the asymptotes separating them all, because again, those are where they're undefined. Okay, I hope that helped. You will have some homework on it, and that's about it. Sorry I'm not here today.